How could you find love in a man's hairy ass? Take the Hershey Highway. Fudge packing man. Fudge packing man. A manly man. Okay.
Yep. Back at it.
Hey guys, I'm back! So in this video, we're going to be talking about Caleb Cain, aka Faraday Speaks. Now if you didn't know, Caleb Cain, or Faraday Speaks, this is the guy that was supposedly alt-right, but then he realized he was wrong, and then he went back to being a progressive. But there was a big stink around him about how he fell down this quote-unquote alt-right pipeline, but then he got out of it. He talks about it like it's getting out of an opioid addiction or something like that. And his entire shtick is trying to warn people about this YouTube pipeline that radicalizes people and turns them into neo-Nazis. 1 second you're watching Steven Crowder, and then all of a sudden it's basically just laying down the groundwork as to why YouTube needs to censor even more without saying that that's what he's doing. Now, a while back, Caleb Cain was on the kill stream, and I wanted to throw some points at him in the call-in system, but he had requested Ralph to not take call-ins during that show. So I decided to make my own video, and well, like 2 months later, here it is.
I've actually been kidnapped by Brittany Venti. She's forcing me to make this video.
Faraday Speaks, he often explains how the reason why he fell into the alt-right pipeline was because he doesn't have a very good social life, and he was looking for a sense of community. Now, I mean, that's not too far-fetched, and that's understandable. But the problem is that he projects this on anybody else who's on that side of the political paradigm, saying that the only reason why they're on that side of the political paradigm is because they're looking for a sense of community too. So he projects his personal experience onto everybody else. It's not because they've done any research on any of it and came to a certain conclusion, or that there's any data to back up their views. It's always only that they're looking for a sense of community. Now, Caleb explains how one of the staple moments that really pushed him away from the alt-right, what really woke him up to what the alt-right really is, was the debate between Destiny and Lauren Southern. And he explains how Destiny just beat her so bad. He beat her so bad, and she just looked like an idiot.
This guy's a fucking idiot.
He just beat her so bad. And she just looked like a freaking idiot.
But here's the thing that's suspicious about that. You saw one debate, and that caused you to completely 180 your entire political philosophy. Which just shows that you obviously didn't do any research on any of these talking points in the first place. You just watched some YouTube videos here and there. You see, the big point in videos like Stefan Molyneux and all of these YouTube videos is they give you these nuggets, and you're supposed to take the nuggets and then find the data and the citation for it yourself. And that's when it really has the power, is when you're able to find actual verifiable sources that back up these claims. But Caleb obviously didn't do that. But Caleb had seen all that he needs to see apparently, and so now he has to all at once just completely 180 his entire political philosophy because of one debate that he saw. It couldn't be that maybe Lauren Southern is just a bad debater, or that maybe Destiny is notorious for being a disingenuous and slimy debater who uses any sort of mental gymnastics that he can to win a debate. Which really just proves all he did was expose there that he never did any actual data or research or just doing basic 5-second long Google searches on any of this stuff. So the real thing that Caleb Cain talks about that he really pulled away from in the alt-right was the race realism stuff and the whole thing about how they sit around talking about how they want to set up an ethno-state. You've all heard it all before. The ethno-state stuff, I think it's just ADL posting at best. I've talked about this in previous videos where you have actual practical solutions to help the white population and the declining birth rates and all of this. There's ways you can set up incentives to help these problems. You don't have to talk about setting up a white ethno-state, which is just cartoonish and ridiculous. But I digress. I can sort of sympathize why he wouldn't find the race realism stuff being appealing. I mean, not that race isn't real, obviously race is real and there are differences between races, but I can sort of see why that would put a bad taste in someone's mouth. You know, I get it. But in a couple of interviews where he breaks this down, he also mentions cultural Marxism. So he's aware of the alt-right now and what it's supposedly really all about. So therefore he's aware of, you know, as I mentioned, race realism and other things, such as cultural Marxism. Now that he's woken up to the alt-right, now that he understands that cultural Marxism is also a conspiracy theory, which is just a progressive talking point. And it also becomes pretty obvious that, once again, he didn't do his research on this issue at all. And he obviously hasn't taken the time to research the Frankfurt School or any of these other things, Wilhelm Reich, Sigmund Freud, and the influence that they've had on the New Left, especially during the sexual revolution. But then he goes further and explains on the kill stream that cultural Marxism talk is basically just watered down JQ. Now see, that's funny because not everybody who talks about cultural Marxism is talking about JQ or talking about it as specifically a JQ thing. Basically what they're specifically referring to are the set of Marxist ideas that really permeated. When people talk about cultural Marxism, what they're specifically referring to is the set of Marxist ideas and theories which really permeated through the 1920s and early 30s, a big portion of which came from Weimar-era Germany, mainly from things like the Frankfurt School, Wilhelm Reich, the ideas that really shaped the groundwork for what would later become the sexual revolution. So then why exactly would he call it watered down JQ then? Well, maybe it's because when you go to the Frankfurt School's page on Wikipedia and you open tab all the most notable theorists and you check their early bios, you see that they're clearly, what JQ means is that they're just questioners. Because that's what theorists do, man. They just question things. What did you think it was gonna be, you fucking racist piece of shit? Nah. Now, on a couple occasions when Faraday speaks, is asked about the Antifa attacks and what he thinks about Antifa, he does this thing where he pretends he's taking a centrist middle ground, but at the same time is able to do that while really giving pass to Antifa on a lot of things. Like, for example, he'll say, oh, I don't agree with Antifa because I don't agree with the way that they go around and kick over trash cans. And that's what he says. He won't talk about the fact that they go around and crash right-wing events and try to bust people's skulls open with crowbars and steel pipes and shit like that.
Who is worse, Antifa or the so-called alt-right?
I think it depends on what you mean there, Jesse. I mean, there's actions by Antifa I don't support, right? I don't like it when people burn trash cans or break windows. I think that's really foolish behavior. But I don't know. It's kind of a false equivalency, Jesse. The alt-right is very antagonistic, and they're looking for fights. They're looking to cause destabilization in the system. So I think it's a false equivalency.
This guy's a fucking idiot.
And this is something they've been doing since the beginning of the election cycle. They crash right-wing events. They attack people with steel pipes and crowbars. They have busted people's heads open with bike locks. They go around just randomly sucker punching people and macing people in the face with bear mace. I mean, isn't it funny how that's sort of lost on him? I mean, he was supposedly in the alt-right, but apparently he missed all of these videos of Antifa doing all of this shit. And then he turns around and says, oh, well, right-wingers are just as bad, if not bad, because they wear masks and they do violence and try to provoke violence. Well, here, dumb fuck, I don't see right-wingers crashing left-wing events or going to pussy hat protests or pride parades and attacking people with crowbars and bear macing people in the face. Do you see that happening? Do you see right-wingers going to these events and sucker punching people and attacking them with steel pipes? Do you ever see that shit? And it wasn't until about a year of this happening since the election cycle and up until Charlottesville that you saw right-wingers coming with their own sticks and equipment prepared to defend themselves against Antifa people who come there specifically to attack them. And then you pull the whole Bronx blogger thing and be like, oh, well, see, look, right-wingers are attacking them back. They're punching back. So therefore the violence is reciprocal. No, it's not. And during the election cycle and up until the Charlottesville event, he was supposedly so deep entrenched with the radical alt-right, but he completely missed all of this stuff. That's really convenient. Now, if you don't know about Heather Heyer, which, 99% chance you do know, Heather Heyer was the woman who was killed in the car incident during the Charlottesville riots, protest, or whatever you want to call it. But he did a tribute video for Heather Heyer's. And the narrative that he spins here is basically that you have this guy, James Alex Fields, who apparently was just so radicalized. He was so radicalized that he just went there and just ran someone over because he was just such a hardcore radicalized guy. According to reports, he was leaving the protest, but then he got caught up in traffic. There were 2 cars and a big crowd of people who were blocking the road. In a couple of videos, you can actually see people attacking his car, hitting it with bats and things like that. I managed to find one video with a sort of dubious angle, but I remember seeing a better angle that showed the full thing. But every time I find it, people always cut it short and they just show the part where he slams on the gas, but they cut out the part where people are hitting it with baseball bats. So if someone can find the full video for me, that would be really helpful. Going back, all I was able to find was one with the sort of dubious angle from further away. But in this video, you can still see them hitting his car with stuff, and then he slams on the gas. James was later apprehended after he tried to flee the scene, and and this is also according to reports, when he was told that his actions had caused the person's death, he broke down and cried. It's also reported that James Alex Fields suffers from numerous mental disabilities such as schizophrenia and bipolar syndrome, and supposedly he had been sent to a mental hospital twice just by the age of 10. There's also a screenshot of a post that went around for a while that supposedly was made by a member of Redneck Revolt, which is basically pro-Second Amendment Antifa. And it seems to show a guy bragging that he flashed a gun at James Alex Field, which caused him to then panic. I haven't been able to find this or confirm whether that's true, but if anybody can give me some info on that too, that would be helpful. But regardless, here you have a guy who is trying to leave the rally. He got his car backed up, there's 2 cars, and a big crowd. People started to crowd around his car and started to hit his car with what appeared to be baseball bats and pipes. And then he panicked, and then this guy, who is a diagnosed schizo, then panics and slams on his gas and tries to run through the crowd and then backs out and leaves. And then when he's later apprehended, he's told that his actions caused the death of someone, and he breaks down and cries. But none of these details were in Caleb Kane's video. He wanted to do everything that he could to just spin the narrative that this guy, you had a guy who just was so radicalized that he just showed up just to run someone over. Like, he's just so radical that he sees leftists and immediately just speeds off to just run him over with the car, because these radical YouTube ideas just made him go crazy. And it's funny because Caleb Kane says that he was alt-right at this time and that he was even defending the driver at the time, but yet he completely missed all of these details and forget all of this happened and just completely left all these details out of his video. Now, it's either that he's completely out of touch or he's doing this on purpose. It's kind of hard to tell with Caleb Kane, but it's fishy after this info has been out for more than 2 years now that he would completely miss the ball on it. So Faraday speaks to the video about the free speech rally in Portland, which was a right-wing event that was protesting against anti-right-wing bias in media and social media deplatforming. And he had these choice words to say about it.
Their movement is kind of falling apart. You know, they're being banned off of platforms. They're being, shamed out of the public eye. And yeah, I mean, they really don't have much of a career left. We saw Laura Loomer have a complete meltdown on, Alex Jones' show. It's kind of sad, I'm not going to lie. But, these people, they went around spreading hateful politics for, damn near a decade. And it's kind of what happens to you when you do that. Yeah, you have free speech, but there's going to be consequences to that, to the things that you say.
Wow, we got a genius over here, guys. Wow, real woke stuff.
Funny saying that went around in the Soviet Union, which is that we have free speech in the Soviet Union. We just can't guarantee what will happen to you after you say it. Now, obviously, that's not real free speech, and that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek statement. But Caleb here is throwing up that type of logic and being serious about it. That's not how free speech works. I hate to break it to you. And also, are you really going to be the guy who's going to dictate whether or not this or that is considered hateful and should get such and such consequences for it being said? I mean, I've already established here on a couple occasions that you do absolutely no research or check your facts at all on any of this stuff. But here, let's draw a scenario. Imagine you have a small handful of social media companies that completely gain an entire monopoly on all social media platforming. And imagine these guys have a conservative bias, and they ban people who are a little bit too hardcore pro-abortion and pro-baby killing. They start banning people who start pushing weirdo shit that sexualizes children. Do you think that the left is going to do the whole thing that they always do, where it's like, oh, well, it's their company, I understand, you know, I don't like that I get my stuff removed. No, they would be flipping their shit, screaming about how, oh, Nazis have taken over social media. They would be going twice as crazy as any right-wingers are going right now. Now let's take it even further. Imagine now if those people then went and did make their own websites, their own video platforms and that, and then all of a sudden you had these groups come in and put pressure on their payment processors and either getting them shut down, or now all of a sudden the only way they're able to pull in any money is through Bitcoin. And this also makes me think of another thing. See, you obviously don't do your research on any of this stuff. Have you done your research on these political, like these progressive talking points at all? You obviously weren't doing your research on anything when you were in the supposed alt-right, and you were just there because you needed a sense of community. So how do we know that the only reason why you're going back to this progressive side is because you need a sense of community? I mean, you obviously found it, you made one video, and then all of a sudden it started getting promoted by all these mass media outlets, and then got like 22K subscribers thrown in your lap. There's totally nothing. Is that suspicious? Nah, I'm just being paranoid. That's not suspicious at all. You made a couple of YouTube videos and then immediately started getting promoted by all these mass media outlets and just got 22K subscribers thrown in your lap. You definitely got your sense of community there. Nah, I don't think that's suspicious. That's not suspicious. Nah, that seems legit. No, that seems pretty legit to me. And that brings me to my final point. What exactly is this pipeline thing that he's talking about? Basically, what he explains is that he started getting into right-wing stuff, anti-SJW stuff, some Steven Crowder type stuff, and then the next thing he knows, because he checks through the recommended, he got recommended Stefan Molyneux. And then that eventually led him to Richard Spencer type people in JF, and then next thing you know, he was goose stepping around in his room in combat boots. And now he has to warn people about this alt-right pipeline to all of these figures that are already very heavily shadow banned by YouTube in the first place. But he's got to warn people about this recommended list and how easy it is to get radicalized, because apparently nobody can think for themselves. That's the whole thing. Assuming his story is true, he wasn't able to think for himself, so he ended up just consuming all this material without doing any research on it, and then he became a radicalized goose stepper, supposedly. But it's not our fault that you are able to think for yourself and do your own research. And it's not your right to project that onto everybody else. And besides, if this whole pipeline thing is worth taking seriously, what would even be the solution? What's the point? All you're doing is laying down justifications and the need for YouTube and social media to basically crank a little bit tighter on right-wing content, but you push it in a way that you are able to say, no, that's not what I said, that's totally not what I'm doing. And for what? Because you couldn't think for yourself, you couldn't do your own research, and now you got to project it onto everybody else, so that YouTube can nanny everything that's going on and nanny the way that people think and the content that they see.
This guy's a fucking idiot!
Hello, this is the Bogdanov twins. We would like to congratulate Pro-Truth Anti-Media on another ingenious video. Caleb Kane is absolutely a total scrub. And also remember to subscribe to Pro-Truth Anti-Media's alternative Vaporwave account called Steroidwave, linked in the description. And also like and subscribe.